Hello, I'm Mors Kochanski, Wilderness Living Skills and Survival Instructor. We are in 4 Dog Stove's back 40, filming things that relate to the outdoors. I'm also the author of a book called Bushcraft. It was called Northern Bushcraft, but the publisher dropped Northern and changed the cover and didn't do anything else, if you were wondering. This book was published in 1983, which means that it's close to 30 years that it's been around. And previous to that, in 1983, I was born in 1940, so 1940 and 1983, that's 43 years. I was 43 years old when I published this book. Now, in being 43 years old, I've always been a person who collected books, and I'm a voracious reader, if I'm allowed to blow my own horn. And I also realized that I was going to write in this field, and I thought that I should study the way diagrams are laid out, study the way text is used in describing various techniques. And it's no small reason that the book ended up being as popular as it is, because of the background effort was all focused on that. And then as I was working on this and writing articles for publication that me and another fellow earned, we got to the point where someone convinced us that we should come out in book form. And today, 30 years later, I often thumb through my book and I say I really surprised myself that it's still so current and such a good book in comparison to some, if I'm allowed to blow my own horn. 4 Dog Stove is probably their most favorite publication. They carry it, try to keep stocked at all times. They import it across the Canadian border and make it available wherever 4 Dog has got their influence. When you look through the book, you'll see that it's not really big. I was told to stay under 350 pages, so I had to be very selective. Every page every chapter is sort of devoted to a practical coverage of it, like knife craft, Axecraft, Sawcraft, Sheltercraft. All these crafts are sort of boiled down to something that I had direct experience in. Like, for example, Firecraft. I started to become quite encyclopedic in what I was going to present, and then I said, oh, I don't have room to say so much. Oh, why should I talk about a fire that I don't have any experience with, although it looks interesting and you find it mentioned in the literature? So basically I included about 4 fires that I directly worked with, to the point where I could say, I know what that fire does and everything like that, and I didn't bother the others. Well, anyway, the situation is that every chapter could have been a big book in itself. It's continued to be quite popular, because I can tell that because my royalties from the book keep escalating every year. There's a few more and more. That means more and more books are sold. Of all I know, there's probably 150,000 copies of these books floating around over the years. 30 years of publication at about $5,000, 5,000 copies an edition. It adds up after a while. The book is primarily devoted to the boreal forest, where we have copious amounts of fuel, where we have a way of life and so on that is a little different from any desert or any sensitive ecology. The ecology is pretty resilient. I bought 20 acres of an acreage, and it was pretty well cleared, and I planted trees when my son was born 40 years ago, and they're almost hug-sized today. And when I didn't mow the rest of the cleared land, for every tree that I probably cut down in my line of work in survival, a tree is growing on my property to replace it, you might say. And I didn't even have to plant it there, because nature can be so aggressive in taking over a vacuum, an area that's cleared. Okay, well, the topics, as you look here, Firecraft. To be skilled enough to light a fire under virtually all circumstances. This is not a manual on survival. This is a manual on a person who would want to be competent in the forest, skilled to derive comfort and sustenance from the forest. That's the ultimate sort of thing in that regard. So chapter like Firecraft goes into the methods of lighting fire, what you're lighting fire with, and what is the end objective. Like, is it a warming fire, a cooking fire, a drying fire, or a signal fire, for example. Then you go to cooking and how to set yourself up so you can be near the fire, and all the different ways to maybe cook, from planking fish to using a steam cooking pit to whatever, and also even mentioning that should you not have brought a pot, how to make such things. Then comes, I think after that, is Axecraft, a very important skill in that the axe is used a great deal to take the wood from the forest and do something with it, whether it's to make firewood or to use it for building furniture or making utensils, etc. Usually a great big tree, because of its knot-free nature and so on, will then have to be sectioned. And so with an axe and a saw, you do all this work on the wood. I stopped short of building a log house with the axe. But then there's a chapter called Sheltercraft, which analyzes every conceivable form of shelter, from perhaps a dry spot under a tree, and how to recognize a tree that provides a lot of overhead protection right short to building a log house, a nice little log house. So it's lean-tos and various types of shelters that resemble cabins, but basically are not a cabin as yet. Then you get into, well, of course, the safe falling of trees. When you get into Sheltercraft, you've got to realize that for you to be able to build a shelter, you have to have about the same knowledge and insights that an architect has to build an energy efficient building. If you neglect any of those aspects, like reflectivity, absorption and re-emission, emissivity, thermal mass, the action of warm air as it rises and floats, you ignore all those things, how can you have anything to work with to make something that's comfortable? Then there's a chapter about what holds everything together, but I could not use any synthetic in here except an axe, a saw, and a pot, and then there's a little shovel stuck in. So there is no nylon rope or nylon tarps or even canvas in order for me to stay under my 300 pages, 350, 300 pages of books. So I eliminated a lot. So you go into the bush and you want to make a snare, you find the right kind of grass, you twist it together, and the snare will be strong enough. Learn how to use spruce roots, learn how to extract strong enough fiber out of stinging nettle that you can make bowstrings, and so on. Then you get into, to my horror, the book was, the cover was printed 2 years before the book was completed, and they had all the blurb on the back, and they said, the important animals. Well, I had to include some animals, so I had to choose the two that were quite important: the varying hare that feeds the individual and the moose that feeds the village. And then I described them in such great detail, and how to hunt them, how to tan their hides. And as a matter of fact, there are a lot of old native people who could read, and they figured I did a pretty good job in describing how you call a moose, and wrote down all the things you want to know about a moose. And of course, we have a certain amount of important plants, like birches, spruces, willows, etc. So we cover them in order that you get an idea how this natural resource can be applied for you to meet your needs. So you can splint spruce and make splint baskets. You can take willow and realize its medicinal qualities for headaches and so on, and make willow baskets, a simple willow basket, so that you got a burden basket or a basket to collect berries, etc. Birch bark. I did not cover how to build a birch bark canoe, but I often would say I should have got a PhD for the amount of knowledge that I presented to the public through the birch bark article that hitherto had not really been organized as much as it was. So you end up finding that a pioneer or someone who wants a good start, they would get this book. But the intention was to completely fill out your education. You'd probably need 10 of them. This is not enough. This is probably 1/10 of what you really should know to be capable of living in the boreal forest like maybe your great-great-grandfather did, or like the Aboriginal people who were here before the white man came, sort of thing.
Are there any famous people or people that have read that book that reference it that you could talk about? Or what kind of things do people say about it after they read it?
Well, usually in most circumstances, it seems, being an obscure Canadian, it doesn't seem like my book and my publisher not really doing a lot of promotion. I'm really surprised how few people across the States would know of my book, but it's improving. In the UK, the Bushcraft Movement, that's the title of the book, started up after I published the book. Oh, well, I could even maybe claim that maybe it stimulated the thought there. And the person that was quite instrumental in promoting it was a guy by the name of
Promoting the other book?
No, promoting my, promoting Bushcraft. Raymond Mears. Well, when Raymond got started, much to probably his displeasure or whatever, he discovered that the Bible was already written. Because when the people in the UK started to look for more information, they would often find this title, get it, and say, oh, we got a good start here, you might say. In the States, it's spreading more and more because I've been traveling across the border, promoting it a bit, and whatever, and people are realizing what they have on their hand. Outdoors people are kind of hard to sell on books sometimes, but it's growing because my royalties are growing to a satisfactory manner, you might say.
Can you describe the person that would be a good book for? Like,
well, right off the bat, if you were going to become a specialist in survival, I would tell people, if you want to go about it in a conventional way where you can't find many instructors, become a really good backpacker, because a backpacker carries the best survival kit you can imagine. And then you read this book. Now, if I took this book and I took about 1/8 of it, that would be very definitely information that should go in a survival manual. The rest is pioneering. The rest is really living in the bush, not specialized from the direction of survival. You might find that if you're going to use an axe as part of your survival kit, well, the manual's there. If you're going to analyze all these shelters from a dry spot under a tree in small increments, ending up in a cozy shelter that's heated with an open fire inside, then that applies to the survival maybe in some ways. But modern survival, to me, is a very specialized area of knowledge, which is something of use to modern day people. This is sort of how my great-grandfather lived, perhaps even in Poland, or how the forest people of Europe would come over to this country hoping that they would end up homesteading in a place where there's lots of fishing, lots of hunting, lots of free firewood, that sort of stuff. And they weren't maybe as fired up about fertile soil for huge farming processes as they are in having all those amenities to sustain themselves. And that's what the intent of the books were. And generally the topics that were covered here would have to continue to be covered in more detail and so on. So here I talk about moose and the varying hare. Well, the next book I would have talked about bears and cougars and other things. And I would talk about more and more. Maybe the next book would have had the 30 most important wild edible plants there are. And maybe there would be a section that would say about the most useful medicinal plants, on and on. Here, you get anytime you talk about a plant, you cover all its uses, and it happens it gives you a working knowledge. But there was no focus on just one specific thing, because after all, this book is 300 pages and it's trying to give you a kind of a functional knowledge in everything from how to use a knife, a saw, an axe, how to build a functional shelter, and how to, use the materials of the forest. So you could do very well, but you could do even better if you got more information, which is coming. Between any publication I produce, I'm sure that Four Dog Stove will carry it, so people are curious. They keep track of what's available through Four Dog Stove, and also through the people that I work with back in Alberta, Karamat, Tamarack spelled backwards.com. They're the ones that would stock there, and they're the ones that are also instrumental in distributing my booklets. This is distributed by the publisher, whereas the booklets that I produce and the videos that supplement and support all of this end up in Karamat's hands. There is a series of booklets I'm going to talk about. The only repetition and updating is the sharpening. All the rest of the information in the booklets. Now, I have so many booklets out there, it could have been volume 2 of Bushcraft, but I chose instead to have it put out in smaller bits so people not have to lay out money for something they don't use. Yeah, the book is readily available generally throughout the world, you might say, definitely in North America and Europe, but you will find that if you want to stay comfortable, that is dry, warm, all the amenities that you need to enjoy life, you're apt to find it in the book. And then when you want to find the book itself, you can count on 4-Dog Stove carrying it here, so that one call, whether it's on the internet, whatever, the book is on its way to your hands.